Hello, guys, gals, and non binary pals. Welcome back to the Storytellers Guild. My name is Max, and we are working our way through Season 1 of our Let's Write series on a little story called Detective Duncan Watercolour, The Case of the Missing Locket. So, we just got started yesterday. You'll notice the camera's a little different today. I'm having some chroma key issues because, as you can see, this side is a lighter green than that side, and so I just stopped fussing with it because what's most important about writing is that you sit down and do it every day, right? And it was starting to be late and I was getting crunched for time and I need to get going. So I want to reinforce that almost every episode of this series because sitting down to write is maybe one of the most important parts of it. Because creativity is a muscle, and if you don't exercise it, it gets weak. And a lot of people talk about inspiration and talent and things, but my partner's dad says uh, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And sometimes working hard is just sitting down and writing for 15 minutes a day. It may not seem like a lot to a lot of people, but if you have been avoiding it or you haven't been giving yourself permission, it can. It can feel like a lot. And so giving yourself permission to do that and to sit down and do that work is really exciting because then your creativity gets stronger and that muscle gets stronger and you become more creative and more excited to continue creating it. It really is a positive feedback loop. So, in the interest of helping that muscle get stronger, let's flex a little bit, right? And let's continue on with our story. At the beginning of every shift of writing, I like to sit down and really get a sense of what I did the previous time. Just kind of, it's like walking, where if you're already walking, you're not thinking as much about the next step as you are the first step. It's like walking downstairs, kind of. And so for me, like figuring out where I was going to step into the next bit of writing is really important. It may not be for you, but it is for me. So I'm going to go back through real quick and just familiarize myself with what I did. I won't do this every episode moving forward. I'll do it before the episode airs and then just like dive right into my writing. But I'll point out that I've already done it so you can have a chance to pause and go back and reread what we've done in the previous session if you'd like to do that as well, right? So, that's another city. About a port. Okay, so right away I see that this sentence here feels kind of iffy. This was not supposed to happen. Punishments for breaking the law were often the heaviest, the worst. Nobody would ever think to rob the nobles. Um, this was not supposed to happen. Punishments were often the heaviest and the worst. And we'll just use that autocorrect feature, and the worst in this neighborhood, part of the city. Nobody would ever think to rob the nobles, but someone had, and more importantly, someone was. And I'm going to continue on now because we've talked a little bit about the scene and what's happening, but we want to get into the action, right? We don't want people to feel like they're sitting around waiting for things to begin, right? And so we've had some fun, but like let's give them what they were on, right? Let's give them some excitement. And to maintain the secrecy of the character that we're working with, I'm going to continue the story as if we don't know who this character is yet. We might later, we might not. We'll see. I haven't decided that. We'll decide it together on down the road. But for now, I want to just say, more importantly, someone was. And that someone, right? That someone was currently climbing into the open window of the Baron of, I don't know. I like Duke better. Duke is silly. Duke of... And this is a fantasy world, so it's like a parallel universe, so it doesn't have to be a real place, obviously. And this is a city that's going to feel kind of like London, but kind of not, kind of like Victorian England on the cusp of the Industrial Revolution a little bit. The Duke of... Let's just say for now, Everglass, because that's silly, but I want to spell it like this. So, that someone was currently climbing into the open window of the Duke of Everglass. who was sound asleep in his bed, snoring so loudly that many of his neighbors had to fashion cushions over their windows to keep the nighttime noise to a minimum. Nighttime, not the nighttime noise. I don't like that. It's too plain, right? This is silly and flourishy and fun. To keep the nighttime hullabaloo. That's a fun word. To a minimum. And that is probably going to be, now that I've just written that down, because I like the idea of making him an unlikable person, right? He's rich, but he's selfish, and he doesn't do a lot of good with his money, and someone's decided to rob him, and why are they robbing him? Well, here's a motive already, potentially, is that he's keeping people awake, snoring. I didn't even think about that when I was writing it. I just wanted to make him unlikable. And then when you think about what makes someone unlikable and why someone would want to rob somebody, those things often go hand in hand, right? So this is a fun little coincidence of things that can happen when you're writing that you don't even plan for. And this is an example, I think, of what people talk about when they say, the characters talked to me, right? It's like you aren't really realizing it, but you're actually like creating little connections and things are happening without you being aware of it. And I feel that sometimes. I think that can definitely happen. But let's continue, because we want to write a story, right? That's the whole reason we're here. So, fashion conditions. The Duke didn't wake when the figure stepped onto the giant fur carpet. So I'm just thinking about, like, what does the room look like? What is this figure doing? What are they going after? Like, what do they want? And what does the Duke want? The Duke obviously wants to stay asleep and be rich. This figure wants whatever they came for, which is going to be the locket of the Duke's, or maybe the Duke's wife, or the Duke's younger sister, or the Duke's, father, or something. It's going to be something important to him that has no real monetary value, but it has a lot of sentimental value, right? And so the person isn't stealing from the Duke to take his money. They're stealing from the Duke to send a message. And this is all stuff that the detective will discover later during the course of the investigation, but this is all stuff we can be thinking about and knowing right now. I'm not going to say wake, I'm going to say budge. Didn't budge when the figure, remember, new keyboard, I'm getting used to it. The Duke didn't budge when the figure stepped onto the giant fur carpet that covered every corner of his bedroom. He didn't budge when the figure tiptoed over to the enormous and expensive armoire stationed against the far wall. He didn't budge. So what I'm doing here is I'm using parallelism. I'm using the same sentence over and over to create a sense of, like, things are happening, and in the things are happening, right? And that little one can start to feel like the footsteps of the person walking through the room in your mind, right? And on top of that, I'm about to disrupt that because I still want to keep the stakes high, right? I want to make this intense and I want to make this scary for the person who is doing the sneaking. So I want to say he didn't budge when the figure opened one of the drawers and removed a very old, very dirtied, very shabby piece of jewelry. And this is like the locket. We know it's the locket because it's in the title, but I don't want to use the word locket yet because I want it to become more exciting later. I want it to be like, ooh, is that the locket? And to kind of like keep a little bit of mystery for the reader too. But yes, as a writer, we know it is. That is going to be the locket. But now the Duke is going to budge. He did budge, however, when a fly and it occurs to me now as I'm thinking more about it, I wanted a fly to like land on his nose and like make him like shift in his bed, right? It's like, oh, and then the person who's stealing from him is going to be startled and temporarily afraid that they might get caught, and we're wondering if there's going to be action happening already in this first scene. But on top of that, this gives me, talking about the fly makes me think, was the fly doing something in the room already? Like, is there some rottenness happening in this place? And obviously the Duke is a pretty rotten fellow, but we could say yes, he left his food leftovers in the room. And by doing that, you also create a little lesson to say don't leave your food laying out when you've eaten it because it'll attract bugs. So he did budge when a fly buzzed over from the when a very fat and very full fly buzzed sleepily. Yeah, let's say sleepily. It's kind of silly. It's a little bit too much probably, but I want to start with this because you can always go real big and then like pare it back a little bit. But it's easier to go big and pare back than it is to start with something small and try to flush it out, for me at least. You might be the opposite, and that's okay too. He did budge, however, when a very fat and very full fly buzzed sleepily over from the leftovers of the Duke's meal sitting on the table by the window. The fly was just looking for a comfortable place to sleep. The Duke snorted. The Duke snorted and shifted in bed. So what we're doing here is we're saying, like, personifying the fly, right? The fly wasn't probably looking for a comfortable place to sleep. The fly was just being a fly, right? But if you say that, it makes it more fun and more exciting. And it makes it, again, you're like talking with your audience a little bit, and it makes it just a little bit more playful. And that sort of playfulness is something that I really love in writing. It's something that I value when I read it in a book, and it's something that I really love to do in my own writing. So the fly was just looking for a comfortable place to sleep. The Duke snorted and shifted in his bed when the bug landed on his nose. And this the bug in this sentence, this whole thing feels a little clunky to me, and so we'll probably revisit this tomorrow because I want to rephrase it, but I want to get through this scene for now, right? I want to get through this little interaction for today. So I want to say the Duke snorted and shifted in bed when the bug landed on his nose. So the fly did something, the Duke did something. What did the figure do? The figure fell to the floor, stopped still. The figure jumped behind one of the big curtains hanging from the wall and tried not to die, to have a heart attack, tried not to die of fright. Tried not to, because all of that is like over the top, right? And that's sort of what this whole world is going to feel like. And tried not to breathe loudly. Tried to steady tried to quiet their thumping heartbeat. The Duke went back to sleep. But the Duke, you know, it's a close call. The Duke went back to sleep. It was a close call, but worth the risks. The Duke had to pay. With a wicked grin. And so now I'm wrapping the scene up, right? I want to get through this. With a wicked grin, the figure tiptoed back over to the window. Tiptoed back over to the window. Leapt back out onto the rooftops and disappeared into the night. Into the purple night, right? And so we bring it all back on the thing. And I think I'm going to get rid of this comma because this last part I want to feel like exciting, like we're propelling ourselves into the next part of the story, which we will continue tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you sitting with me through this. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. I hope it was entertaining. And join me again tomorrow for the next episode where we get into the arrival of the detectives on the scene of the crime. Take care, everyone, and have a wonderful day.